Hey everyone, Samy from Ketchapp here. Glad to be moderating this panel today to discuss the main hyper-casual development prospects for the year to come. Whether it's from a global business perspective or more from a product-oriented point of view, we'll try to cover the most important topics that will impact you in 2022. And to do this, we have a top-tier list of speakers today, including not one, but two Antons for a maximum amount of confusion, and I'll let them quickly introduce themselves.
Okay, who
I'm
starts?
Anton. Yeah, I'll start. Anton from SayGames. I'm responsible for working with the teams and help them on board and then release their games to market with SayGames. So part of my job is looking for teams and working with the teams who decide to work with us, and then the other part of the job is to actually work with them on producing their titles and release them to market.
Yeah, and I'm Anton. You can refer to me as Tony just for convenience. So I'm from 24 Play, basically developing games, and I believe I'm the only representative here from the development part of our great industry.
My name is Sergey. I'm publishing lead at Azur Interactive Games, doing the same stuff Anton does, trying to find cool developers and make hits with them, as well as I'm head of Azur Games Belarus studio. We create hybrid casual games and some casual games. So we're glad to see you all here, guys.
Hi, my name is Balaji. I'm the head of publishing at Sunday. We're a hyper-casual developer and publisher based out of Hamburg, Germany, part of FPEG Group. That is also in turn part of the Bertelsmann Group, one of the biggest media group in Europe. My job is to overlook the whole publishing pipeline of Sunday, and happy to be here.
Well, glad to have you all on board, guys. Thank you for the quick introduction. Now, I would like to start our discussion with a quite open question. What's the most game-changing thing that happened to the HC industry in 2021, according to you, that will have an impact as well in 2022? Maybe, Sergey, if you want to start.
Actually, we see how runner games genre is increasing critically, and personally for me, the phenomena of Netflix series of Squid Game and how it can be adapted, because it's not something new when developers all over the world use some trending stuff to create games. But the most difficult thing is to find games so that you can convert it into gameplay. And for several months, for half of the year, we've seen several phenomena like Squid Game, like Huggy Wuggy, and you can see top 100 App Store and Google Play. Almost everyone uses for SO and for gameplay things from that Netflix series. And actually, it is interesting how the industry is growing from year to year. And yeah, I see that games are becoming more difficult. Even runners are becoming more multi-mechanics. For example, recent hit game by Freeplay, it is a runner game, yeah, Twerk Race I mean, but it has several mechanics, and it can be called just a simple runner game like it used to be 2 years ago. So the genre is increasing, the competition is increasing. We see that many huge players such as, for example, Top War or Nexters with their Hero Wars, they use creatives, they use hyper-casual mechanics for their ads, and it also affects the market of advertisement, and not even huge players, but average one also, because I'm always looking through ads market at mid-core titles and AAA titles. So the competition grows. That's what I see, and that's the main, maybe the main fact for me in 2021.
All right, thanks for this detailed answer. Plenty of interesting things in what you said. One of the maybe most interesting thing that you mentioned to me could be what you said about Squid Game. So indeed, we saw many games, millions of downloads regarding these types of games. Do you think this means that maybe this could be the comeback of IPs in hypercasual that tend to never not really exist in this on this market until now?
It can be, but what about Squid Game? It's just a luck that Squid Game itself is about game. So that's why it's easy to adapt and to make to create gameplay on that base. For example, we have a hit cookie cover, and it uses some elements from Squid Game original series. And the interesting thing that every game in the series can be converted into a hyper casual game. I don't think that we will observe a lot of cases like that, but who knows? Who knows? We see that Huggy Wuggy IP as well used worldwide by everyone. So we will see. I can't answer you clearly, but anyway, it's interesting times. Interesting times. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And something else that you mentioned about the rising competition, well, this is not new. I guess it has been the trend in hyper-casual to see it rise year after years. One thing that's interesting and also linked to the Squid Game situation, you probably noticed that Netflix announced that they were joining the gaming industry. Uh, how do you see that? How do you see this newcomer? Is it for you more an opportunity of, I don't know, maybe new partnerships, maybe new horizons, or on the contrary, do you see this kind of newcomers as new competitors? Because what the first Netflix games that were released looked kind of like hyper casual titles in a way.
I'll try to be short and quick because I don't want to make it solo speech. But I don't think it's going to be a very tough competition because these guys have several, not the same aim, and their audience is the audience of guys who want to see films, series, not play games. So it will be anyway difficult. They have to start from scratch. Their audience is not actually looking for, they're not looking to play games, and anyway, it's about different aims and different instruments. So I don't think it's going to be tough competition. Maybe partnerships because of IP. Yeah.
And maybe Anton, as your only representative from the pure development side, could you see them, a Netflix kind of platform, as a sort of opportunity to build game with them, this kind of thing? Is this something you, as a developer, could be interested in, that you've already digged a bit, or not at all, and they remain very far from the current HC market for now?
Yeah, it really depends on what Netflix plans to do, what management do they have, because, well, there were some cases when big companies started doing games and, in fact, did nothing in the end. So once again, so it depends. But of course, it would be interesting to do some IP-based games. But as you can see, in fact, all these games that use IPs, they don't tend to use it in a good way. I mean, legally nice way, right? Because I don't think that everyone has like a cooperation agreement or IP license from the developers of Squid Games and else. So IPs in general are like a tough point legally. So it really depends. But when speaking to Netflix, for example, we of course would consider it a good thing to add to overall, game development business, that you have something also motivating players to play the game, because you have the same characters they love to watch, and etc. So it's a nice point, but still no idea how Netflix will manage all of it.
You mentioned something very interesting on the fact that indeed we see many people using IPs that they don't own. We see many ads, Sergey, that's what you mentioned as well, ads from mid-core players using hyper casual kind of references to lower their CPIs. So basically gameplays that they don't own in their game. Are misleading ads becoming the main way to succeed on the mobile gaming market, and more specifically in the HC industry, would you say?
Well, we always had misleading creators in game development. So it's pretty obvious that big players with casual games, mid-core games, are going to use simple mechanics to basically introduce their game. So it's totally fine. But I don't feel like misleads are going to be too much engaged with hyper-casual market. Of course, in case you have like a character that you don't have in the game, it's mediocre mislead because in a way, yes, it is misleading that you use a different character, but in the end, you still have the same mechanics. So I wouldn't call that a mislead like in a general way. Of course, it is somehow, but not too much. Because how I perceive misleads is that you see one thing, then you go to the game, you download it, and you start playing, and it's completely different. So.
Actually, the answer is simple. The mislead used to make threshold entry lower. And come on, guys, hyper-casual games, it is about the lowest entry threshold and no need to make it even simpler. So that's why mid-core players and AAA players use misleading videos to make this threshold entry lower. So that, yeah, to buy new users who haven't even thought about playing such kind of games. That's it.
All right, guys. Maybe Anton, SayGames, what's for you the main game-changing thing that happened in 2021, the most influencing one?
It really depends on how you look at it. You can look at it from the monetization point of view, from the product point of view, because there are so many things that happen every week. So it's really hard to track all of them and kind of recognize the biggest one. Obviously, from the monetization point of view, the iOS, the new privacy system is the most impactful one for the entire market. We've seen the Facebook release today and the situation on the stock market with them. So it really affects everyone, and especially those who are the biggest one in terms of the ad serving business. From the product point of view, we're seeing a very big increase in development times. Obviously, as everyone else, we're seeing that deeper games with deeper gameplay with bigger game sessions are evolving and becoming dominant in terms of what teams are actually working on, because it seems that everyone is now looking for engagement rather than a low CPI situation, because it's now very difficult to find something entirely new and something very successful in terms of very low CPI and quick access to market with that kind of game. So the situation is changing in a way that longer PlayStation, larger engagement, and essentially the higher LTV is the key to be successful in the market at the moment, because you won't find a 20 cents CPI game, at least not every day, as it's been like a couple of years ago. So this is how the situation is changing. It doesn't mean that everyone should go and do this right now, because that really requires a higher development capacity, and it's very difficult for the teams to transition from a pure hyper casual genre where you only have a simple running mechanic and just a lot of ads in between the levels. Obviously, there are still games like that, and we've released a number of games recently. One of them is Merge Animals, which clearly resembles the same situation with a very high marketability and a very simple gameplay mechanic. But the number of these games is decreasing every day, and more products are aimed towards to longer PlayStation, essentially. So that's from the product point of view. Mm-hmm.
All right. So two big things that I would keep from what you just told us. First, on the monetization, well, the ad side, basically, the iOS privacy policy changes have had a huge impact. Do you expect the same kind of changes with the Google privacy policy updates coming later on this year?
I honestly don't think that the changes are going to be that excessive as with Apple, because Google is primarily an ad company. So so I don't think it's going to be that much difficult to adopt to the new system for everyone on the market. But there will be there still will be a lot of changes, I think, going forward, and everyone will have to just adapt to it.
All right. And second topic that you mentioned regarding the fact that indeed you saw an increase in terms of production duration, in terms of content in the games. Would you say that hyper casual is getting less accessible than it used to be for the developers?
I don't think it's less accessible. It's still possible to build a very successful hyper casual title with a team of 2 people, or we still have teams who are basically one sole developer works on his games and has a couple of releases per year. Is just the hit rate has decreased if you're just trying to find a very low CPI and trying to use the same old model as everyone was using 2 years ago. You can still do it, but it's just going to take you a lot more time, and you have to be really creative in terms of what you're actually working on. Another thing that's very important to understand is that it became much more difficult to test and iterate for the smaller teams, because as soon as you launch your game to market, it becomes a common knowledge. So everyone sees everything that's being launched on both Google Play and iOS. All the publishers have teams who are basically researching the market on a daily basis. Everyone sees everything, and the next thing that you see happening is everyone tests the idea that you've launched. So it really becomes a race towards to finding a great game idea, and then launching this to market, and then still be the first one who is going to launch it to market with good enough quality and product metrics to be the biggest one on the market. Because as soon as you launch a successful thing, there's going to be dozens of prototypes launching every day with the same kind of game mechanics and ideas resembling the original title, to try to compete with something that was launched initially. So it just becomes more and more difficult every day, and the market is, as Sergey said, is very competitive, and the competition goes in many ways. It's not just there are more teams and more games and more prototypes being tested every day. It's just the level of competition in terms of the quality of the competition is increasing, and it's very important then for any developers when choosing their publishing partner that your partner has all the tools for you to not just to come up with a great idea and a great gameplay mechanic, but actually to have all the tools in place to help you deliver the game as fast as possible and the best possible quality. And that includes the analytics system, the A/B testing, the video testing, the CPI testing, whatever the internal analytics team and the motion team. So whatever that is that you have to have in order to be successful in the market. Because when you're a small team of people, it's just very hard to compete with everyone else, especially in the situation as we have, where the number of teams is still growing, the number of prototypes launched every day is still growing, but the number of games that reach the top in terms of downloads and revenue is not growing. It's kind of staying the same.
Very interesting. At some point, you mentioned that the challenge for your new ideas has hits and low CPIs were more difficult to find. Basically, you had to be super creative and more creative than before, maybe, about the idea you would start to develop. On this side, and maybe guys, if you have an opinion on this, um, did you change something in the way you ideate? Do you think that's maybe one way to, I don't know, maybe reduce the quantity of ideas, of prototypes that we develop, but to target more specific ideas, that to spend a bit more time on the ideation, maybe to use a different method of ideation? Did you guys change anything on this side? Maybe Balaji, we didn't hear you yet.
Sure. I mean, just going back to your question on the trends, right? Just to touch upon that. So the two from that I would like to highlight, and which goes into your following question, is one, using CPI as a north metric while you're testing games, right? I mean, it didn't affect us because we never used that from day one. We always used IPM, and towards the end of the year, we saw more and more publishers also going towards that direction. And not that CPI doesn't matter. In the end, you need to have a LTV greater than CPI. But you know, having this 15 cents or 20 cents CPI as your gate, right? That got removed for a lot of players, and I think that did help a lot of developers because it's not easy to get that, like Anton and Sergey mentioned, right? Second is I don't think the hyper casual games have changed. They have just evolved, right? The spectrum has become more vast. You still, I mean, you have games that are more polished, more complex, more engaging, higher LTV, higher playtime. You have more idle arcades being tested out in the market towards the end of the year than before. But that doesn't mean that a solo developer cannot make a runner anymore, right? Even if someone makes a runner that gives them like 100K profit, I don't know, like it means a lot to a developer from in certain parts of the world. So you know, I think both coexist. You just see more of the later now because they look different, right, compared to what was happening before. And and as to ways of ideation, sure. I mean, there's always a quarter or a month where there's too much of a certain kind of mechanics, and you always try to then do something different either with it, or you try to go back in time, maybe a year or 18 months down the line, and try to bring back that something did work back then, and you try to make it work. And this is where you don't need to really innovate a lot, right? You need to adapt it. I mean, you will see new mechanics now and then, but mostly you do see a little adaptation in the hypercache. At the end of the day, you're still trying to provide bite-sized entertainment for like 10 to 20 minutes. You're not trying to make like Bitcoin games in this segment, right? So the amount of innovation or amount of ideation still remains in the same bucket. And yes, if you have access to market intelligence tools or data, you try to use that in the ideation to narrow down the number of concepts you need to come out with. Because at the end of the day, in this genre, there is no quality without quantity. You still need to make like as many prototypes out as possible. But like instead of going like wide out, you try to narrow it out with some kind of intelligence, right? And then I think as long as the communication between the publisher and the developer is transparent as to okay, this CPI means you are going to make X amount of revenue and not like your millions, and you're okay with it, and I think it's fine. I mean that's my take on it. And sure you can like you have your seasonal effects like Squid Games and stuff, but I see that as like a short-term game. I mean, in the end of the day, when it's not your IP, so you're going to get blocked by ad networks. You're going to like surrounded by app stores or Play Store. If you try to just rip it off, right? You need to be a little bit smart about it, and also there's a matter of luck. So in terms of going back to your question on ideation, sure. I mean, cloning doesn't work, but it's not that you have to come up with your moonlight idea every time. There's nothing going to be that's extremely new, right?
All right. Thanks for this answer. Many as well interesting things. In terms of maybe I don't know, could be interesting to hear Tony from 24 Play to hear you on this side from a studio's perspective. Do you feel like it's getting more difficult maybe to find those interesting ideas harder than in the past? And did you find some fixes to address this?
I wouldn't say that specifically for us, ideation became harder because we have a lot of people in the studio and we have dozens of ideas. But there is a twist throughout all publishers. I mean, over the course of the last 3 months, mostly everyone started looking for product metrics instead of just CPI. Of course, you have to pay attention to it, but everyone wants to develop more complex games. And well, I feel like, in fact, the market's getting more complicated for solo developers or really small teams because sometimes you have to do a nice amount of game design, for example, and you have to create new mechanics inside of a game for the core loop basically to work. So yeah, this is the major part. Just the fact that everyone's switching to product metrics, games are getting more and more complicated, and I mean, I feel happy about it because, uh, well, just the games that we are developing are becoming more and more interesting to play, not just showing ads at slow CPIs and player spends 2 minutes in a game and he's like, oh, I'm ROAS positive. No, we want to develop uh, better games that engage players for a longer amount of time, and this basically leads to the development cycle being a bit longer. And there is another fact that I wanted to mention just because the development cycle is longer, publishers tend to use burn rate models with developers instead of payment per prototype, which is which is nice as well for everyone. And this is simply because you have to spend more time. Sometimes like usual hyper casual could be done in 2 weeks, something more complex 3 weeks. When you go to hybrid casual, it could be 2 months, 3 months. So that's how it goes.
Very interesting.
I'll add that there are publishers that are still looking for very low CPI just to, trial and error, and you go further. Once you have this like low CPI, you just make all you can to make the game ROAS positive and bring you the best of it.
Really interesting. And as a studio, how do you kind of prioritize or decide on what you want to really push for? Like if you have on one side, and that's what we get a bit from everything that you guys said, on one side we still have the super marketable, super viral kind of prototypes that have to be developed faster than ever to avoid copycats, to be launched quickly. You have these kind of games on one side. On the other, you have another branch of the market where with idle arcade, with deeper games, more engaging ones on the longer run that are longer to develop, require more level design, more expertise maybe. How do you and how do you prioritize? How do you choose? Do you have a few tracks focusing on, let's say, the classic viral game chase, and on the other one, teams dedicated to deeper games? How do you manage this?
Yeah, it's an easy one because we indeed have different pipelines for different projects. In case we are just want to test CPI and see if it's low, it takes less amount of time than a full prototype. And when you come to more complex games and the competition after you make the first test, just we try to make sure that our product that is the first test, in fact, is good enough to be scaled with small adjustments like adding more levels, adding more content. Doesn't take too much time as overall gameplay polishing and adding new mechanics. So when we deliver a complex game, we try to make sure that it's nearly done. And
All
this
right.
way you just avoid all the competition.
That's very interesting. So it means that basically you have maybe more content, more like the first version of the game is less a MVP than it used to be in the classic hyper casual history, where you had only a few levels, just the core loop of your game. Is it also something that you're doing on your side, Anton, Sergey, on like, do your first versions of game include more content, are already richer than they were in the past?
Yeah, of course. It is becoming more deep, and We started practicing this approach maybe half of a year ago, maybe even earlier, and we haven't ever pushed our partners in terms of time for development, but for the quality. And yeah, more and more often we ask our partners to approach the first build very attentively and to think about the first flow of the user, to think about his education, I mean tutorial, and of course the progression. The main trouble of the game developers worldwide is progression. Progression doesn't mean increasing in difficulty, but it means adding new mechanics, sub-mechanics, and some new level design approaches, and not just the core gameplay loop, which is used from level to level with small level design features, but the approach to mechanics in general, the approach to core loop gameplay. Several years ago, the first prototype was for everyone just a core loop gameplay and nothing else. It was enough. Right now, yeah, we're trying to add as many mechanics as we can and to see whether the core idea is scalable. I mean, we're looking for churn rates, we see playtime. So yeah, if you want to see the clear situation about your churn rates, about your first flow, you anyway have to create the first prototype as it was 80% game polished, you know. So yeah, the basic rules of prototyping have been changed critically. Yeah.
That's super interesting and a bit maybe counterintuitive for developers who are used to typical hyper casual, where the goal was really to get the first results as soon as possible and thus to come up with the smallest version of possible of their game. Um, in average, we used to say that it was 1 week or 2 weeks to reach that first MVP testable game version of the game. Right now, and for this kind of deeper games, what are the current thresholds? Do you let developers and studio work for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, and you then test the game for the first time? How do you manage this?
It depends on the level of Unity developers in our partnership studios, but usually it's about 4 weeks for one prototype. And you know, the interesting fact about accessibility, you were speaking with Anton from SayGames before, the accessibility from technology side actually becoming better because, you know, for the last 2 years, the technology itself has grown critically. And I really appreciate what Unity does in this field. I mean, you know, dots system. I mean, all the stuff which help us to get better, how to say, yeah, to get better performance. And moreover, VFX graph. You don't have to think about shader languages, you know, you can use already made solutions, and it all helps to create better games with higher quality. The only thing whether you are on the same page with the developer and with the transparency, because some developers just don't want to share their results, some results, I mean, beginning of development and several weeks after development. They just want to show you already made prototype and you should test it. So we ask our partners to send as many builds as they can so that we go into game design. And yeah, that's all about the approach, actually. Nothing new there.
Really interesting. So, and I guess that's many interesting in everything you mentioned, guys already. If it takes us longer to come up to the market with a prototype, and if that prototype is richer in terms of content, features, mechanics, how do you, like, I guess the way we check the KPIs, the way we try to understand what happens in the game when it's live is already becoming different. We are also analyzing way more things in games in general, I would say. Uh, thinking back about the old days of hyper casual, where the two KPIs that were checked were only retention and CPI. I guess today it's quite different. We heard Balaji on the right UA KPIs that you guys are checking. What do you check in terms of, so you launch deeper games with more content? What kind of things do you try to monitor in general? I don't know, maybe Anton, SayGames, if you want to take this one.
Well, first of all, we've never been looking at CPI as the major metric in the first place. We believe in the product metrics and engagement. And if we see a product that is worth pursuing, where we can see a healthy day one engagement, everything else is not important. If you have people playing your game on average for 20 minutes, that means that you have a game that people like to play. Everything else is not really important. After we see that kind of product, then we look at everything else. Retention is something you can fix if you have a great in day one engagement. You can fix the retention day one, day two by doing various things like, okay, good engagement, that means the majority of people playing your game consume all your content on the first day. That means the second day retention is going to be very low. The first thing you have to check is, does adding more content really helps to your product, right? So, and there are things like that, dozens of kind of producers rules to navigate and help to navigate the team at where they need to go in terms of their product development. And so data was always the number one thing at SayGames when we were actually working on the games with the teams. And we've never been working on kind of the prototype grinding mechanic where, because we've never been working with the teams on paper prototype kind of model. We're not in a hurry in terms of, well, we have to put it out as soon as possible because the prototype price is fixed with the publisher, and if we delay the prototype, that means the team is going to lose the money, etc. So it's never been the case with SayGames, and nothing is really changing for SayGames and our teams in terms of this market shift, because basically the market is actually going where we were 2 years ago when we actually started working with our tier one teams. So if there is a game, the CPI will follow, because we have tens of people team at our motion department, and their job is to basically take the product and then find the marketability for the game, assuming that there are metrics in place. And we believe that the game has the potential to become successful. So that's the approach that we always had, and we still have. And it was never about, how much time you have to spend on a prototype. You have to spend as much time as you need to actually put it out there. And when we launch a prototype, that means we're actually confident about how the game is going to perform. And it's just about collecting data at this point. So the release to market as a prototype launch is just about collecting data. So we think that the game is going to perform with these numbers because we played the game and we play tested before launching to the market. And then we confirm our assumptions with the data, and then we use the data to iterate on a daily basis. So as a producer, I don't even look at CPI anymore as the first thing I look at when I go to the dashboard, to the analytics system. I look at, have we increased the session time, how this monetization approach is changing, how the people actually engage with the game, because we have lots of things that we can do in terms of fine-tuning the monetization, in terms of if we are talking about a pure ad-based games, we're talking about ad delay, ad timeouts, and when do you start showing ads. How do your CPM metrics look like in terms of what are you focusing on? Are you focusing on interstitials, or you're focusing on rewarded ads in any particular game? So it's just about looking at the data every day and fine tuning the game to get where you have to be in terms of LTV. And obviously, as we said before, LTV has to be greater than CPI, but it's just a matter of time when you have a great product.
That's really, really interesting. So we have on one side, SayGames definitely in-game metric first approach. What do you guys are you guys from the other companies here also going in that direction, or do you maintain your focus on the user acquisition metrics for now?
So for at least for us, like it it falls into three buckets, right? If you think about it, I mean, we as a company have a very simple goal of making profitable hyper casual games, and for that you have just a very simple formula: LTV greater than CPI by a certain percentage, right? So taking that into account, it falls into three buckets. One are sometimes it's a highly marketable concept for a set limited period of time. Like, I don't know, Squid Game is an example, right? Because you could get a 15-cent CPI on TikTok for a very short amount of time. So if you're able to pull off a smaller product in a faster time, that gives you a little bit lesser LTV than, let's say, a idle arcade, then it's still a profitable game. So in that scenario, when you're following a social trend or any kind of trend for that matter, it's super important that you say what's the best IPM metric you can get, and what's the fastest product you can fit, right? The second is the team. Second is the product. For when there are products where you want to see the retention and engagement metrics early on, so there, you would also, if the product is good enough, and like Anton said, like if you have like a 20 minutes playtime, it's like amazing that you do know that you will have couple of options of concepts that can fit that product, right? I mean, like a natural fit, not a forced fit, of course. And then you as a publisher would have worked on so many marketability tests that you would have that bank to like fit the product, that the insights that you can provide to the developer. Then it depends on the teams as well. The third one, some teams just want to make products first. They're not even comfortable making the 15-second or the 30-second video that you need to run the test. So there, as a publisher, you will support them with that. Every publisher does that, right? At least every major publisher does that. You would have your creative team where you would support that kind of a team, ask them to just focus on product, and you take care of the marketing side of things. So that does mean that, and also like maybe some teams are better making puzzle games than you would, then, and puzzle games do have like, longer session times or bigger LTVs, and then you would want to give that amount of time for them to make like a nice game. So there you would go to the deep end of the products. You would have more polish. You would also have like live ops for some games. Let's say even idle arcade, right? It takes double or three times the time of the usual hyper casual games, and it doesn't end at release, right? You have a longer content pipeline out there, but to commit that kind of funding, you want to make sure all the data metrics of the product are in place for you to make that kind of decision. So it really depends on these three factors from my perspective.
Really interesting as well. There are a few elements regarding since Balaji, you mentioned the teams. Anton, SayGames, you told us about, well, I think you all mentioned it actually, the burn rate model becoming more important. One thing that we see as well, one of the maybe big trend of last year, and that you will tell me if you think it might continue or not. We see more and more studios being acquired or invested in by publishers. Do you think first it will continue, and what kind of needs on both sides do you think it answers? Sergey, maybe if you want to start.
Yeah, thank you. Yep, actually, for the 2021, we've been invested. We invested in 5 studios, and the best case was with Cop Game Studio. We only, we invested in this studio in 2 months from that agreement signed. Cop Games released the first hit, then one more, and we now have 4 games launched with that studio. Okay, maybe you can call it luck, but it's all about the processes as well, because you integrate the studio fully to your processes, and it is about, it is about greater commitment. Because when you work on pay-to-proto basement, or when you cover burning rate, you can spend 1 year, for example, or half of the year working closely with the studio, and you teach them. You spend your time, you spend your expertise, you try to grow with them. And something happens, and in half of the year or in 1 year after the agreement is terminated, the studio decides to go to another publisher, for example. And if you haven't managed to launch something, it means that you not just spend money, but time and maybe some opportunities you could use with another kind of partnerships. And in that regard, investment is about, it's about commitment. What about us? We buy about 15 or 20%, so it's minority share, so that studio has the right to choose what they do and so on. But it is about commitment. We understand that we do not spend, okay, money is not a problem. We don't spend time. We grow our expertise together, and we are here for long run. And studio feels it. Studio feels that it is for a long run, that the agreement will not be terminated just by chance, and they have to look for new partnerships. What about studio demands? Cash in, cash out. It can be both. For founders, for founders, such a bonus, and as well as possibility to hire high quality specialists. And I see only pluses in this. If we speak about minority investments, about 20% of the studio, I see only pluses. I think that this model will be, you will hear more and more cool agreements, investment agreements in industry in that regard, and because it's very positive one. I think it's very positive experience.
Really interesting. So both in terms of, well, security, long-term perspectives, things like this definitely make sense. When you talk about commitment, does it change the way you interact with the studios? Do you see them more often? Do you share more information? Do you have special tools? Is this another level of cooperation, or do you see it as just a way to, let's say, kind of secure the relationship for both sides, just removing the uncertainty?
It's more about secure, because we try to share as much as we can with all exclusive partners, even if it's not investment based. If it's exclusive, it means that we anyway have to risk and have to spend our time and some our tools to share, because we are here together to make cool games and to earn money. And even if in 1 year the studio decides to move to another publisher, that's okay. That's part of process. That's part of this rotation in industry. That's okay. But yeah, if we speak about investment, that's about security and about commitment. We feel more comfortable and convenient, and the studio does as well.
Anton, SayGames, any words on this topic?
Yeah, we have quite a bit of our approach is a bit different. Obviously, we do support our teams financially when they need to or when we need to. Some financial deals happen all the time, but we don't disclose them publicly. We don't look at this as a measure of control. So buying a stake in a developer just to control them, so they don't go to working with another developer, is not something that we do. We don't have any exclusive agreements with anyone, and we're actually proud of that. That we had 0 teams so far who stopped working with SayGames and went on and started working with someone else. And for us, it's all about a very fair and transparent terms. And we know we're very strong on the market in terms of the tools that we provide, and then, our production and the producers' work and the UA and the marketing and everything else. So we're very confident in our partners, and we're very confident in ourselves. So it's never about making sure that we secure or control. It's just about working with the teams that we like, and for the teams that work with us, they love working with us, and we can provide as much value as we can to them. And if it works for everybody, this will last for years. And it's a public information. Our terms are always 50-50. And as long as we work together, everyone's happy, or vice versa. As long as everyone's happy, we're gonna work together, and we're gonna make money. The studio's gonna make money. So essentially, there's no point in going somewhere else as long as this relationship works. But you can have as many exclusive agreements as you want, but there's always a way to find a way to get out as a team. You can start a new entity, you can start a new company, you can take the core team from this company and start a new company, even if that company was bought by someone else, etc. There are so many ways to do this, and there's no way to secure your rights 100%. So we don't do that as a measure of making sure that we're gonna work with this team for as long as we have the right to do so. For us, it's about provide as much value as we can as a team, and then make it work, because we believe that if the team is strong, for us, the success is inevitable. And as soon as we have a joint success, it's gonna last for years ahead. Even if we're talking about like single products that we develop and support for many months and years to go. So that's the general approach.
One more interesting thing I want to add, by the way, about investments, we see a little bit wider in this term. We believe that in several years, self-publishing will become more and more actual, and we want to teach our partners who we invest to do self-publishing. So it's a so complicated thing about what strategy to choose, but I do really feel about the industry that more and more self-publishing studios will appear, and in that regard, it's interesting for us to invest and to teach really strong studios to do that in terms of business, in terms of UA sharing, in terms of processes sharing, and so on. But yeah, what Anton says, that makes sense, and it's cool when you have a cool core of partners who are motivated. Actually, it is what every publisher wants, to find and to create such a base of stack of cool studios, motivated and loyal, so that you don't meet any agreements and so on.
Obviously, totally. We have still 5 minutes left, guys. It would be interesting for me to hear what Anton 24play has to say on the matter. Do you see what's the end game for a hyper-casual gaming studio in 2022? Will it be like, do you have only 2 options? Is it either being acquired or becoming big enough thanks to publishers to self-publish one day?
Well, it depends on the studio, obviously. Well, I honestly consider self-publishing is better, but of course you have to be you need expertise, scaling games, etc. And also talking about commitment, you don't have to do all the M&A stuff to commit to a studio, because when I started working with a partner, whoever it is, publisher, developer, I want him by default to be committed to our mutual benefit. So yeah, it's just M&A in general is just an option that you can use, but overall it's not something mandatory. Talking about, once again, self-publishing, I would go for self-publishing.
Okay, very interesting. We have plenty of other additional topics that we could have talked about for 2022. NFTs, of course, we could have talked about, but I guess we don't have maybe enough minutes left to do so. So maybe one last word, guys, each of you, like your biggest prediction for 22 and the year to come. Balaji, if you want to start, 1 minute each, you guys.
Sure. My prediction would be definitely more games. It's not going to go down. Every publisher that you talk to is talking about testing more. There are so many new developers coming, and for every new developer, they will have to make so many more prototypes to get that one hit game, right? So it's not going to go down. And the spectrum, like I said, is going to get more wider. We saw hybrid casual last year. We saw idle arcade last year. Maybe we see something else. So the spectrum of hyper-casual is going to get more wider in terms of LTV and engagement and retention, but that doesn't mean your runners are going to go away, right? So yeah, that would be my prediction.
Thanks, Sergey, shortly.
Fully agree with Balaji, so I will not spend time for that. But what about NFT? Yeah, it's going to be a raise of NFT, but please don't fool yourself. The blockchain team is the most important thing. The tokenomics, total value blocked, the percentage of emission you have, and stuff like that. NFT is not a simple thing. So, but anyway, it will increase. Yeah. So for me, the only word NFT maybe for 2022.
Antons, whoever wants to start.
I'll start. I don't really have a prediction, to be honest. Everything that was happening last year is going to happen this year as well. So it's a continuous process, right? There's not going to be some abrupt changes on the market that will collapse, make a market collapse, or like exponential growth, because it's a very mature market and there is nothing that can happen that will drastically change it. So consolidation will continue. While companies are going to buy other companies to gain access to new markets. Large publishers are going to buy smaller publishers to access new market niche. Publishers are going to buy studios to have more development capacity. Ad monetization is going to evolve. Products are going to evolve. Marketing strategies are going to evolve. So in 12 months, we're going to end up somewhere. God knows where, but let's hope we're all going to make some really good games on the way there and become very successful. So.
Well, thanks. And Anton, 24 Play, the last word is for you.
Yeah, my last words are always the same. Do great games and you will succeed.
Well, that was really cool. Thank you, guys. It was a pleasure to have you all. I hope you guys in the audience enjoyed this panel as well as we did as speakers today. And I guess we'll see what 2022 has to offer to us. And it will be another super exciting year for hyper-casual. I'm pretty sure of it. Thank you, guys.
Bye, guys.
See you.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.